Well, hello and welcome to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my producer, Lindsay, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Studio today. This is our third podcast of the week. We are so excited for our ever-growing podcast. So excited to have Marty Kendall on today. He will be talking about data-driven intermittent fasting and big fat keto lies. And if you follow me on Facebook, I put out a post this week about my results. Go ahead, Lindsay, and put up that picture. If you follow me on Facebook, yeah, I've lost 32 pounds doing modified intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Producer, do we have that picture up? Okay. So anyway, I've lost 32 pounds doing modified intermittent fasting. As Marty will get into today, intermittent fasting is different for everybody depending on your activity level and depending on many other factors. So Marty will get into that today, but you do not want to miss out on this. Intermittent fasting can work for a lot of people. I think, evolutionarily speaking, I think it makes a lot of sense. I know we've talked many times about how, 4 to 5 meals a day is best for us. And, but Marty's going to get into some of that stuff. And the big fat keto lies, I'm interested myself because keto's not for everybody. No diet is for everybody, but here's some options. And Marty is all the way across the world in Brisbane, Australia. Is that correct, Marty?
Yeah, Brisbane, Australia. Yep.
All right.
Great to chat to you, Shawn. This is exciting. Great results, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's not easy to get that transformation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm not quite done. I want to lose probably about 7 to 9 more pounds and, be right at about 6% body fat because I think that's where I'll race my mountain bike optimally. So that's what I'm working on. So Marty.
All power to weight ratio for that, isn't it?
That's right. You know all about it. And speaking of power to weight ratio, I have an FTP test today.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to find out what my power to weight ratio is. So I'm not super excited about it. I'll see if I'm going to puke or not today after the 20-minute test. But always super fun afterwards. So, Marty, go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome to our show.
Yeah, thank you. Marty Kendall. I'm an engineer by day. Happened to marry Monica, who's a type 1 diabetic, about 20 years ago, and we had no idea about insulin or blood sugars or diabetes or anything back then, and she had no idea really from the education she'd been taught. Decided to try and have healthy, happy kids rather than and avoid complications that come with really elevated blood sugars during pregnancy, which for type 1s is pretty scary. Got motivated with that, and then maybe 5 years ago, just found Rob Wolf and low carb and keto and got swept along with the whole keto fasting, intermittent fasting craze. But then as an engineer, just trying to fine tune it for things that obviously didn't work for me or other people. And not everybody's looking for a therapeutic ketogenic diet, and not everybody has amazing success fasting for weeks on end in terms of optimal body composition in the long term and optimizing metabolic health. So I've just been on a journey of taking the data I can get hold of to analyze it, number crunch, and try to understand what works for most people most of the time, and then how to individualize that for different goals.
So your wife's a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
I just got a question earlier this week about a type 2 diabetic.
Sure.
And, is intermittent fasting safe for them? So can you speak of the difference of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes and is intermittent fasting okay for those?
Yeah, definitely IF is a good idea for type 2s. Type 1 is where your pancreas doesn't produce any insulin, as you'd be aware, due to a autoimmune condition. We don't fully understand what happens, but the insulin just stops happening from the pancreas and you have to inject it. And Moni uses a continuous glucose monitor paired with an insulin pump that continually drip feeds her insulin all through the day. If she didn't get that, all her stored energy would basically dissipate, vomit, explode into her bloodstream, and her glucose, ketones, free fatty acids would be through the roof. She'd be in diabetic ketoacidosis, and basically all the stored energy is released into her bloodstream. So she needs to take insulin to moderate that release of energy into the bloodstream. And I suppose that's a really interesting insight for me that's helped me to understand what insulin really does is that it's not a unless someone's running around jamming insulin into you with a pen 24 hours a day, you're not actually going to gain fat because of insulin. You increase insulin in your body because you've gained fat because of your poor food choices and eating too much too often. It's the donuts, croissants, cookies, and all those carb plus fat foods that make you gain fat. So that was a little pet peeve passion of mine interjected into there. But for type 2, it's all about finding the right balance to reverse your obesity, which reduces your insulin, which reduces your blood sugars, and pairing intermittent fasting with nutrient-dense eating is the ultimate way to reverse type 2 diabetes. And we're just starting a data-driven fasting challenge with 1,000 people today. We just clocked over 1,000 people, and it works amazingly well just to fine-tune your timing based on your blood sugars to help people dial in when they eat, and if they eat nutrient-dense food, when their blood sugars are a little bit high, they just need nutrients, not fuel. And if their blood sugars drop, they need some fuel, and they add some fuel at that point from fat and carbs at that point.
So tell us a little bit more about this intermittent fasting and what that means in your study or to an individual, because it's always different, whether it's a 6-hour window, whether it's an 8-hour window, a 12-hour window. Some people fast for 48 hours. So tell us about
and people talk about the benefits of autophagy and, do you need to fast for a day or 2 days or 7 days, or, Jesus fasted for 40 days and do I need to go that long to get all these magical benefits of autophagy? But really these, we've got studies in mice for 48 hours, but one mouse day is 40 human days. So to get that result, you might be up to 70 or 80 days, and most people will be dead at that point. So it's like, it's not just a matter of what I realized, it's not a matter of fasting for longer to get the results. What you need to do is what you've done, is dial in your body composition to get optimal metabolic health, to get to the point where you've got a good body mass index, a good waist to height ratio, a good level of body fat, not too low, but obviously getting to an optimal level of metabolic health where your blood sugars are at really healthy levels. And that's where all the autophagy really happens. Your cancer risk, your diabetes obviously risk is blown away. All the things that are related to metabolic health improve when we dial in our body composition. So it's not a matter of fasting for longer. It's a matter of finding that balance that will enable you to achieve optimal body composition over the long term. And like Janet on Facebook might be doing a 24 intermittent fasting routine, and Fred might be doing 16/8, and it's like, well, how do I know which is right for me? Is it, just because Janet drives a Prius hybrid 20 minutes to work, doesn't mean that just because she fills up her fuel tank on every fourth Saturday of the month. If you have a totally different routine, you drive a pickup truck and have a 2-hour commute, your fueling routine needs to be completely different, and you just can't follow your favorite inspo on Instagram and get the same results by mimicking exactly the mealtime. You'll just end up going, I'm so freaking hungry, and just binging. And that's what I found myself doing. Just, when you try to fast for longer, you make these really crappy food choices at the end when your lizard brain kicks in.
That's right. And I appreciate you sharing that. And that's on this podcast, we've told many people that, no diet is right for everybody. So, keto is not right for everybody. Intermittent fasting is not right for everybody. You got to find out what works. And intermittent fasting is no different. And I can tell you my personal experience, because I'm an endurance mountain bike racer. And, obviously I can't fast on the days I have a 5-hour race. There's just no way I can fast.
You need the fuel.
Right. Exactly. Now on my day, or if I have a short workout, I can fast on those days. It's an hour, not really intense. I can fast on those days. But even if it's a 3-hour workout and it's a little bit intense, I can't. If it's just a workout, I still can't fast on those days. I need fuel before, during, and after the workout usually. So you have to find out what works for you. Can you give a guideline to the average person about what? I know this is a very general question, but about what intermittent fasting, what can they start with to find out what works for them? Where should they start?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people try 2 meals a day, or it really helps to not eat late in the day. That's one thing we really know is, eating 11 o'clock at night, you're more insulin resistant and more of your energy goes into storage. And if you're sitting in front of Netflix with your your Cheerios and whatever Doritos and going, this is great, I'm just feeding my face, that's going to be stored as fat because you're more insulin resistant. You'll go to sleep and store it rather than getting on with your day and getting on your mountain bike and using it immediately. That energy goes off into storage in your fat and your liver. But so bringing your final meal forward a little bit really helps. Maybe trying 2 meals a day with no snacks. But what's really important is to not go too long that you end up craving those really bad comfort foods that just refill both your glucose and fat stores at the same time. The fat and carb foods, the donuts, croissants, cookies, etc., that will make you eat way more of those foods. You don't get a satiety full signal. And so if you find yourself craving those foods, you're going too long, you need to back it off and focus on food quality is what we found. And using your blood sugars before you eat is a really helpful guide to know whether you're actually hungry, you need food, or you just, there's so many other reasons we eat that aren't related to actual need for energy. So using your blood sugars before you eat just seems to be the, my favorite hack to help people understand if they really need to eat or they can wait a little bit longer.
Yeah. So educate us a little bit about that. I mean, it is pretty simple to check your blood glucose now.
Yeah.
You can do it with a finger stick. You can do it fairly cheaply. You can buy a machine for very inexpensive.
I've got a little Contour Next one with a box of strips on the desk, and you feel hungry, you think of eating, you check your blood sugar, and it's high, and you go, well, I didn't really need to eat. Maybe I can wait. But what we do in data-driven fasting is we get people to baseline over 3 days. So over 3 days, we say, when you're hungry enough to eat, doesn't matter if it's a snack or whatever you typically eat, just check your pre-meal blood sugar before you eat when you're eating how you normally eat. And then after that, let's try to wait until your blood sugar is just a little bit lower than that. So you delay a little bit more, and then as you successfully get below your trigger, more often than not, your trigger starts to drop a little bit. So it's like progressive overload training for your metabolism, that it just continues to dial up. So, you don't want to, if you tried to do a ultra marathon when you hadn't been on the bike for 2 years and never swum, you'd completely bonk and fail. But if you train a little bit more, you progressively train your body, you'll be able to do that eventually, and you'll be able to smash the ultra without bonking. And most people dive into fasting thinking, Janet on Facebook went for a week and I can too. And it's not that hard to not eat for a week. It's not easy, but it's not hard. But what's hard is to refeed intelligently at that point and get the nutrients you need so you don't lose lean mass and just keep on gaining body fat while you're losing your precious skeletal muscle that powers your metabolism.
That's correct. That's what's so important about any kind of fueling or any kind of weight loss program. And we're going to discuss that more over the next couple of weeks and as in our podcast and on social media. But, maintain lean body mass is very, very important, especially
Absolutely
as we age.
critical.
Yeah,
definitely.
Especially as we age, because it's harder to gain your lean body mass back. It's not that you can't, but so you're saying 2 meals a day is what you're saying. So
it depends. Older people, like you say, if they're less active, if they're not a mountain biker, if they're not doing 3-hour rides, they might be able to get away with alternate between 1 or 2 meals a day. We tend to find older people find the sweet spot that allows them to continue to lose weight. But people who are more active might be alternating between 2 and 3 meals a day, guided by their blood sugars. And initially it's a little bit random. We just say, just wait, watch your blood sugars, calibrate your hunger, understand whether you're really hungry. But eventually we want people to find their own routine that actually works for them, so the meal times aren't completely random. They get the circadian rhythm dialed in, and they know what they're going to eat when they're going to eat. And maybe if their blood sugars don't come down because they ate a bit too much in the last meal, they'll skip that meal and come back later. And it's actually not that hard. And everybody comes from extended fasting and alternate day fasting and all these other versions of fasting, go, wow, I get to eat regularly and I get to eat these, hearty big meals, and this is so cool.
Yeah, and it's quality of meals. It's quality food, right? I'm high in
Totally.
protein and real food, not processed food.
Yeah, it's all about what you eat when you eat, and just not doing that too often.
That's right. And so when you talk about blood sugars, you average on this data-driven fasted study that you're doing 1,000 people. You average their blood glucose for like 3 days, so you kind of know what their normal is. Is that correct?
Yeah, normal for them. You can't. There was a study in University of Otago where they tried that. They tested, let's look at your typical waking blood sugar and do that versus trying to get people to reach optimal, which was 4 millimolar, which is quite low. And just the people who were trying to get to a really low optimal blood sugar before they ate just fell off the wagon and couldn't sustain it. So what we realized is you need to find your baseline for you, and just, that progressive overload again, just make a little bit harder next time. Not too hard, because when your blood sugars drop too low below your normal, you'll just want to raid the pantry for everything that's carbs and fat together. You'll just your lizard brain will seek out the magic combo of carbs, fat, low protein, low nutrient density that allows you to avoid the famine that you just inflicted on it.
Right. So for those of us in the United States, including myself, can you give the conversion of 4 millimoles to milligram per deciliter?
I think it's 70 milligrams per deciliter, so it's 4 by 18. Anyway, I should know that as an engineer off the top of my head, but yeah.
So 70 milligram per deciliter. If that's a normal blood sugar, they wouldn't eat until their blood sugar got below that. Is that correct?
Yeah, in this study, and they just found that doesn't work. So you've got to personalize it to your blood sugar. So in the data-driven fasting app, we get people to log their pre-meal blood sugar over the 3 days, and then it all guides them as to, you enter your blood sugar and go, maybe it's a bit high, maybe wait. But if you are really hungry, let's prioritize nutrients, which is protein and nutrient-dense foods without carbs and fat. But then if you get your blood sugars low, it says, okay, you need to refuel, maybe add some, non-refined carbohydrates to refill your glucose, so you don't feel like you're bonking and you need to eat the entire pantry right now.
Right. So are you still recruiting for the study?
Well, it's a challenge that we're doing every 6 weeks or so. So it's a 30-day challenge that we do via in a Facebook group. So this amazing community of people have grown up around it that get this amazing success. And it starts today, Saturday. Well, it's Saturday here in Australia at 4:30 in the morning. But for everybody watching, they can jump in and sign up to start on Saturday in America. And would love to have them. They can go over to datadrivenfasting.com and join the challenge if they want to play.
Producer, can we stream that website? And can we, producer, find out if we can stream one of that Facebook group? Is it a private Facebook group?
If you, I'll post links here and in the chat for you.
And while you're doing that, so what is the challenge? What do people have to do during the challenge?
Yeah, so it's just a matter of grabbing a blood sugar machine and a blood sugar meter and just testing their blood sugars before they eat. Well, not quite. That's data driven.
Is that yours?
No, that's not me.
No, that's not right. Go ahead and send us the link, Marty, and we'll stream it.
I just posted a link in the private chat, so check it out.
Okay.
So during the challenge, they download the app, they download a manual. We've got over the last 9 months, we've had more than 100 different questions that I've answered and gone to town with the full explanation. So there's all this information if you want to learn all the nuances of your blood sugars and how that works. But it's quite simple. You just have to check your blood sugar before you eat, when you feel hungry, and then wait a little bit longer. And as we go through, we just guide people to fine tune the process and understand, why the blood sugars rise a bit more when they exercise, when they do intense exercise, or when they do slow walking or whatever, their blood sugars tend to drop. How focusing on protein helps the blood sugars to drop so they can eat again more quickly and sooner. So they don't have to, if they eat high fat foods, the blood sugar tends to remain stable but remains elevated for a long time, doesn't actually drop. So if they wait really long, so you might be fasting for days at a time before you reach your trigger again and you can eat. So we just go through all the nuance, but the essence is quite simple, and eventually we start to dial in what to eat versus when to eat.
And so what are you seeing? You've done one of these challenges already, is that correct?
Yeah, this is our 7th.
Okay. So tell us what is the goal of the challenge? What do people, what should they expect, and what are the results they get usually?
Yeah, just in really quick fat loss around the middle, the visceral adiposity, the waist to height, the body fat drops down because due to oxidative priority, you've got to burn the glucose first before you can attack the glucose, the glycogen stored in your liver,
Right.
and the fat in your blood, and then the fat on your body. So you have to deplete that first. And if you deplete that a little bit more each time, the glycogen fills up your glucose, and then the fat is used for fuel, and then you actually attack your body fat. So just by taking that in a progressive overload sort of manner, we just get amazing results over the long term without getting to the point where people binge. Diabetes reversal, fat loss, feeling good, and just really spurred on by the great results. People can check out the website of the group, and we've got a whole bunch of different leaderboards of the results people have got.
So the best way to sign up is through the website or through the Facebook group?
Through that website, datadrivenfasting.com, and
Right,
sign up for the 30-day challenge. That'd be cool.
Yeah, we will put that in the links, and it's ever going. So if you can't do it right away, you could maybe do it next month or something like that. Correct?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, correct. We've got an unlimited option where people can sign up for unlimited, because people find that they sort of get the hang of it the first time. They lose a bit of weight. They learn to understand the true hunger. Then the second time they come back and really lose a ton of weight, and then go, okay, I'll keep coming back to get to my goal. And then they come back to maintain, and then become moderators and guide other people because they want to share what they've learnt and be part of the ongoing community. So we're doing 7 a year, and people can just keep on rolling for the unlimited.
And is there a fee for this, to sign up for this process?
$37. So compared to Zoe and other sort of similar programs, it's about 10% of the price.
Yeah, so that's very, very affordable. And the only other thing they need to do is commit to buying a blood glucose monitor, which honestly, you can get one in the States for probably $10.
Or get free with healthcare.
Right. Or free if you buy their strips sometimes too. So yeah. So and the strips you can get like Walmart, for instance, for our listeners and viewers out there in the States, you can get them for like $10. You know, and if you have any questions about that, listeners and viewers, let me know. You don't have to pay big dollars for a machine. You can get them for inexpensive. So, reach out to us on Facebook or whatever, and comment so we can help you if you want to do that process. So
a lot of people get into using the continuous glucose meter, but a lot of the time it just creates more confusion than clarity, and we just want the minimum amount of data that's actionable without confusing people.
Well, and I mean, continuous monitoring can be helpful, but like with any data, if you're not gonna use it, then don't do it. And because it is confusing. So it makes the most sense to me to check your blood sugar right before you eat and after you eat to see how your body responds to certain foods. And
we don't want people to see their blood sugar go, spike really high, because it takes a long time to come back down. But continuous glucose meters tend to drive people to go, okay, I need flatline blood sugars, so I'm going to swap out all my carbohydrates and just add unlimited fat, because that lets me maintain flatline blood sugars, and then that doesn't lead to satiety or weight loss or diabetes reversal, and often worsens the situation because they believe that this fat is a free food and their blood sugar's a flat line, and doesn't end well.
Well, all right. You just really stamped on all the keto lovers. So
Well,
tell us
I've,
about which.
I've been there.
Right. No, I get it. And, I can't go keto. I just can't. I mean, I think as an endurance athlete, it is very, very difficult to go true keto. Now, I will say this. I have watched my carbs through this intermittent fasting process. I have eaten less carbs. And I think just like you said, it decreases my glucose in my blood. It also decreases my glycogen stores, and then it helps me burn fat. And on less intense rides at a lower intensity for longer duration, I'm able to burn fat without having to intake glucose. So I don't have to fuel as much on my bike, which is a big advantage when you're doing a 5-hour race because you don't have to stop at aid stations to keep fueling or pack a bunch of fuel.
Definitely.
You've got a lot of fuel in your body, and we all, even if we have low body fat, have a lot of fuel in our body for days. Really.
No, definitely.
So Marty, tell me about Big Fat Keto Lies while we're talking about keto.
Yeah, we sort of segued from that nicely. Monica's type 1, we've had amazing benefits from a lower carb diet and getting her off the blood sugar insulin roller coaster. So that's a really big deal if you're injecting insulin, because you don't want your blood sugars to be, Dr. Bernstein talks about the law of small numbers. And if your blood sugars go up massively, then you have to jam in a whole lot of insulin to bring that down. And then her blood sugars are crashing, and then she's hungry and has to eat again. So that blood sugar roller coaster is the enemy for someone with type 1 diabetes. And to some extent, for someone with some level of insulin resistance and type 2, they want blood sugars in the healthy normal range. So we say we don't want your blood sugars to go up by more than 1.6 millimolar or 30 milligrams per deciliter after you eat. You probably ate too much or too much carbohydrate at that point. You need to dial it back a little bit. And that just helps people to, I mentioned Zoe, who's a big Tim Spector, big company that just came out with a study that demonstrated, based on a whole lot of CGM monitoring, that people whose blood sugars drop a lot before they eat tend to overeat at the next meal. They tend to just feel too hungry. So that's why we say stabilize blood sugars. Once your blood sugar gets a little bit below what's normal for you, eat again, eat well. If your blood sugars drop too low, you'll probably be prone to eat crappy food that's not going to be good for you, and you're just going to fill up all your fuel tanks, and it'll take a long time to deplete them. So, definitely massive benefits of low carb. But I think the benefits of low carb tend to come from not adding more fat. You don't need to fear fat, but a lot of the benefits of Atkins, Bernstein, Banting came from increased protein, which drives satiety, which leads to fat loss from the body. It's the endogenous fat from inside your body you want to lose, not, you don't want to have high ketones because you've got exogenous fat coming in from your diet. And people are testing their ketones, and I was prone to this, and you're chasing high ketones, and I need to get the optimal ketone zone. If I get to 3, I'm winning, and I'm going to be losing fat, so I just need to have more butter and MCT oil, and I don't look so good in the mirror, and I feel really bad, and I feel really sluggish. And so I realized that you needed to find a way to dial in satiety so you were less hungry. So you were the fat in your diet. You weren't adding fat to your diet. So we all eat until we feel full. So you need to manage satiety to enable you to drop body fat. So you're getting endogenous ketones.
Right. And essentially what you're saying is that when you eat high satiety foods, which basically are high in protein, mostly meat, you get satisfied. So you don't need as much carbs. You don't need as much fat. So essentially you're burning your own fat. And so essentially, because you're eating less calories, that's why you lose weight. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. Right. That's as simple as it is, but it's choosing what you eat that manages how much you eat. You can't control how much you eat forever. you can't outsource your satiety to a smartphone app, because eventually your lizard brain outsmarts the smartphone app. It's not really that smart. Your amygdala, which keeps you alive, is incredibly powerful, and eventually you'll end up face down in the donuts, and that doesn't lead to optimal body composition and all those things we talked about before.
Right. So, what are other big fat keto lies? Is that the main one, or do you have some other big fat keto lies? I know you wrote a paper about it.
I suppose that the first one was the misunderstanding that more ketones was better, because in the first few weeks of a keto diet, ketones tend to drift up, but also waking blood sugars do, and free fatty acids do. But as you reverse energy toxicity, as you start to draw down on your body fat, the energy in your bloodstream doesn't back up into your bloodstream. So you don't see elevated glucose or ketones or necessarily free fatty acids. They all sort of come back down. So, if you're doing keto for a few months, you see your ketones drop. You're no longer peeing purple on the magic ketone stick, and then eventually your blood ketones start to drop as well. So at that point, people go, "Oh, I'm doing keto wrong. I should be eating more fat." And it's like, no. Just, that's okay. Over 2 years, the Verta study showed that, at 1 and 2 years, people pretty much reverted to baseline blood ketone values. So that optimal ketone chart of, you need to get over 0.5 and ideally over 1.5 is just unsustainable and leads people to hammer in more fat to keep the ketones high, which is not going to lead to diabetes reversal or optimal metabolic health.
Right. Now, and here's what my thought is about the whole thing with any kind of diet is that, eventually your body is going to reach homeostasis. Our body always tries to do that. Yep. So this is one of the arguments, and I never had anybody able to answer this question well. Mm-hmm. So we talked about glucose, glycogen, and fat burning. Those are, we want our main fuel stores to be that. I mean, our fuel stores could be muscle, which we don't want, but it could happen.
Or alcohol, which has to be burnt first.
That's true. Yep. So when people go on these high fat, low carb diets,
yep,
I'm going to assume on the short term, their glycogen is depleted, correct?
Yeah. The glycogen drops. I suppose it depends on how you define a high fat keto diet, whether do you have epilepsy, Alzheimer's, dementia, or Parkinson's, and do you really need it is the first question. But yeah, sorry. Yeah. So your blood sugars will drop.
And will your glycogen replete itself after you've been on keto diet long enough? Will your glycogen stores replenish itself? My thought is they would. But there are some people that say that your glycogen doesn't replenish itself, so you'll never have glucose in your blood again. I still think that glucose is the primary fuel that our body wants to use to fuel itself. That's my opinion. So I always think
fast burning fuel,
yeah. So I always think no matter how high a fat diet you eat, if you do it for long, maybe short term, you'll deplete some glycogen, but your body is good at replenishing that for storage, correct?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. There was some studies with Jeff Folick with the FASTER study where they had keto athletes that they were very much keto endurance athletes, and after endurance events they found them to replenish their glycogen stores quite effectively. I suppose with gluconeogenesis you don't replenish glucose as quickly as eating sugar gels. So if you're doing explosive activities that you actually need intense bursts of activity, maybe a bit of carbohydrates, and even Zach Bitter, who's 100-mile endurance runner, will use some targeted carbohydrates around the actual activities, but most people aren't running 100-mile races, so they don't need as much glucose. It's the reality. But so just because Zach eats that way probably doesn't mean you should eat that way. But what happens over time, if you've still got a lot of fuel backing up in your system, you've exceeded your personal fat threshold, and your body fat can't store any more energy, all the excess energy just backs up in the system. So your body can still make glucose from the glycerol backbone in your fat and obviously your protein, and then that just backs up in the system. So especially in the morning, people on a keto diet see elevated blood sugars, waking blood sugars, because they're still making glucose from their fat and their protein. And because they've got excess energy, they see elevated glucose in the morning and they go, oh, that's okay. It's just physiological insulin resistance. And that's a good thing, means I'm doing keto right. But it's like, oh, wait up. Excess energy in your body is not necessarily a good thing. And maybe you need to lose a bit of body fat so that energy isn't overflowing into your bloodstream as much, because it's that waking glucose that tends to be so highly correlated with all of our metabolic disease.
Right. Or another way to get rid of that high glucose in the morning is exercise right after you get up.
Yeah.
Use the
Exercise
energy.
especially long, slow walking or low intensity exercise just burns your fat and then your glucose drops. So it's walking is underrated. We don't do enough of it.
Yeah. Just movement. I mean, we just got to get up and
Any
move.
movement. We're all so sedentary, and then we go to the gym for half an hour, and
Right. Wow. Well, Marty, there's been a lot of good information here. So I just want to ask you a couple questions as we wrap up this podcast.
It's been fun.
So, yeah, what do you have? First of all, I want to comment that I think it's very interesting and it's very special that, really the reason that you really kind of grabbed on to this model is because your wife's a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've got a twin brother and his son is a type 1 diabetic. And so the names Dr. Bernstein, Rob Wolf, all those names ring a bell to me and my brother is an analytical chemist. So he's very data driven. So he would check his son's glucose 50 to 100 times a day, to find out how his body would respond.
On the continuous glucose monitor pretty much 24/7. And it's such a learning experience. Every belief you have about nutrition is just smashed by the data as you see what's actually happening every 5 minutes.
That's what he discovered. So, yeah, I think, when someone we love has some kind of, diabetes or some kind of disease, those of us around them can dig more into the research and help them out. So I appreciate you doing that for your wife. I'm sure she's eternally grateful, and you've got a lot of good information that you can help thousands of people all over the world now. So that's awesome, Marty. So thank you for that. And what drives you? What do you have a passion for?
Wow. Somebody asked me that the other day. They said, data-driven fasting's taking off. What's the, where do you think this will go? What's your dream? And it's like, oh, okay, let me think about that. And I thought, data-driven fasting leads people to avoid the pitfalls of fasting and all the beliefs around that. And I need more ketones and autophagy, and I just fast for longer. And eventually they find they need to eat well, and they need nutrient density and satiety to get a nutrient-dense diet. And at that point, they start to choose good foods, and all the dogma about nutrition that's generated by ethical, religious, and commercial interests is blown out of the water as people focus on nutrient density, and they go looking at what's in my food. Does it contain nutrients, or is it just sugar, flour, and refined seed oils with a bunch of flavors and chemicals to make my dopamine explode?
Right.
And that just cuts through the bullshit of all of nutrition and all of the food marketing. And at that point, we get people, people are all on about sustainability and the environment. And if you just eat plant-based, it's good for the environment. What's good for the environment is having a food system that involves plants and animals together, that creates regenerative agriculture, that makes a vibrant, healthy ecosystem where everything comes together the way nature intended, and we get a planet that lasts a whole lot longer with happy, healthy humans, rather than this Wall-E dystopia where everybody's eating this processed crap with bright, shiny labels that says it's high in whatever the current fat is. So, I think there's a long-term goal here that we need a food system that drives a healthy environment, that we can all be happy and healthy in the long term.
Well, and speaking of that, when we talk about when people that are vegetarians or vegans or plant-based diets, when they say those are what's sustainable and we don't need to eat animals, let's realize, like just you said, that plants and animals are in a symbiotic relationship, and plants cannot survive without animals. I mean, nitrogenous fixing animal or waste is how plants get fertilized. So without the animals eating those plants and fertilizing those plants, we have no plants unless we do synthetic fertilizers, which is what they don't want to do. So,
well, they are. You know, the amount of synthetic fertilizer
for sure.
from methane from when the Haber-Bosch process was patented in 1930, you know, the amount of synthetic fertilizer we're just dumping into our food crops, massive monocrop cultures that just provide empty calories that are fueling the seed oils and the flours and refined grains. It's just insane. It just tracks perfectly with the obesity epidemic. So, and that fossil fuel fertilizers is the nub of the problem. If you took that out, you wouldn't have the population explosion or the dilution of nutrients in our food system that is really why we're all sick and fat.
That's right. That's right. So let's go ahead, producer, and stream the data-driven fasting website. And go ahead, Marty, and tell us one more time how people sign up for this.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, just go to the data-driven fasting, click on the little 30-day challenge button in the top right, and you'll join the Facebook group. And there's a 140-page manual and a whole lot of daily posts that will just guide you through one step at a time, one day at a time, and with 1,000 people who are all excited and heaps of momentum to drive through the process. Yeah, it's a really great community. I love it. It keeps me getting up at 4:30 to chat to people like you.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for getting up so early your time, by the way. And
Pleasure.
At our pharmacy, Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, we're doing a movement challenge as we did last fall. We're going to do another movement challenge in May, and it's basically 40 miles. It's called the Mount Everest Challenge, and we're doing 40 miles in 30 days of May, 31 days, I guess. And I am going to, now that I met you, Marty, I am going to do it myself, and we're going to do a challenge in June. We're going to do the data-driven fasting challenge because I want our patients, our listeners and viewers to understand the benefits of fasting and how it could work for them. It will work for them. They just got to find out what works, and your system creates that method because everybody's different. So I appreciate you for being on today and educating our listeners and viewers, Marty.
That was so much fun, Shawn. I really thanks for listening to Rant and Rave.
I love it. I love it so much. So thanks for being on, Marty. Thanks for listening and tuning in, everybody. As always, you can tune in on my personal Facebook page and the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy's Facebook page, Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube site, and all the podcast forums. Please like and subscribe to them and comment so we can get more great guests like we did today. And speaking of guests, we'll have David Blattant on our show Monday, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. He is a former hospital administrator, and he's going to be talking about healthcare policy. And I'm super excited to have him on. We've talked things like that before. You don't want to miss that episode. So thanks for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Shawn. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.